going to give this talk in English because I'm slightly less stupid in English. Mais je vais le faire avec un esprit français, avec une âme française. Je blague. Mais je vais parler doucement et simplement. Donc, ne vous inquiétez pas. And actually, the question is here, can capitalism save the world? And it's going to be a very short talk. Because obviously, no, capitalism is what got us into this mess. The search for profit and growth is what leads to exploitation of the planet and of people. And so the answer is obviously no. Thank you very much. No, mais no, je blague. It's a little bit more complicated than that. Because, we think about the power plant polluting the world, and that's capitalism and this constant growth that's eating the planet. But then we also look at the local grocery store that only supports regenerative farmers and healthy food and hosts community events. That's clearly good for the world, and that's a business too. Even if it's a cooperative ownership scheme and governance scheme, someone had to finance that little grocery store. It probably makes a profit, and it's good that it makes a profit because it means it can survive and maybe support even more good things. And so that's all business. And so when we ask, can capitalism save the world? It's complicated. It depends what you mean by capitalism. It depends what you mean by save the world. Maybe we could start with that question of what do we mean by save the world? And there's this great definition that exists, which is the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. In French, you say les ODD de l'ONU. There are 17 goals, like eliminate poverty, feed the world, renewable energy. These are things that we collectively, all the nations of the world have gotten together and we've said, this is what it means to save the world, to have a positive impact. And actually, it's pretty detailed because in the 17 ODD, they have sub-goals, sub-indicators and metrics. And altogether, there are 231 indicators, very specific sub-goals. And this is what we mean when we say save the world. And so when we ask, can capitalism save the world? Can business have an impact? We can actually ask 231 questions. Can business do this, this, and this? And because I am a really fun guy, I actually went and I spent many hours and I went through every one of these sub-indicators, all 231, and I tried to analyze, can a business make a difference? Can a business achieve this impact? And some of them, this is as part of the global goal about health, that we want to eliminate malaria. And so we're going to measure the number of people with malaria per 1,000 people. And actually, there's a well-known and well-studied way to eliminate malaria. It's to distribute bed nets to protect against mosquitoes that carry malaria. And there have been lots of tests about how can we distribute these bed nests. Maybe it could be a business. Maybe we could sell them. And that doesn't work, actually. Actually, the things that work are having governments and nonprofits fund the distribution of these bed nets. And so for this one, business is not the answer. It's pretty clear. The way to save the world is through government and nonprofit action. Here's another one. We want to save the world by having more women in government. Because actually, when you do the studies, when women are represented more in government, government works better. It's nice to hear. That's true. Business is not going to make this change. It's pretty clear. This is about culture, this is about media, and this is about laws. Here's another one. Renewable energy share in our total energy consumption. As a species, as a planet, we consume an enormous amount of energy, and today the majority of it comes from fossil fuels, and it pollutes the planet and the atmosphere, and it's leading to global warming. We all know about this. If we replace that with renewable energy from solar and wind, then we would have a healthier planet. It's clear we need to do this. How are we going to get there? there's probably a lot of answers. The government needs to fund more deployment of these renewable resources. But we also need business. We also need businesses to continue to innovate on the technology. When the government spends that money, they're probably going to spend that money with a business that's going to go install the renewable energy, that's going to make the products, that's going to service the products. And so, yes, capitalism has a role to play here. Here's another one that's pretty interesting. There's hundreds of millions of people on the earth who are migrants, who leave their home country where they were born, and they go to another country. And for many of them, they can't really work in their home country, and they leave in order to find work. And they get a job, and they send money back home for their family who stayed. And these are called remittances. And remittances represents a huge portion, actually, of the global economy. And today, to send money back home, you have to use a service provider who charges a very high fee in many cases. And this is unjust. This is unjust because these are poor people supporting their even poorer relatives. These remittances are very important, actually, an important part of the global economy. This is not a good place to have a big profit margin and businesses that control it. And actually, I know this is a tech conference, and I'm not allowed to say anything bad about blockchain, but I tend to think that most cryptocurrencies and blockchain projects are scams or bullshit. But there's a lot of work in the blockchain community to solve this remittances problem. And it's actually an area where blockchain and cryptocurrency could lead to the transfer of money from one country to another with almost zero fees. And this would be a huge victory for humanity. And it's an area where actually what's financing that is all this innovation money that's going into blockchain and cryptocurrency. So can capitalism address this one? Yeah, it can. And so when I looked at all of these 231 indicators, I found that 32% of them, according to me, very subjective, could be addressed, not solved completely, but addressed by a for-profit business. And this is probably an overrepresentation because, like we saw, for some of them, you need business and government, business and nonprofits. But it's pretty interesting. To me, it means that if we want to save the world, the vast majority of the work we need to do, over 2/3, is through government lobbying, changing our laws, it's through changing our culture, it's through changing our media, and it has nothing to do with for-profit business. But it does mean that there's some minority part, less than 1/3, where business has a role to play. And I think we can ask two questions after seeing this number. The first question is, if you have 100 euros or any amount of money, and you want to use that money to save the world, what should you do with that money? I think you should probably spend a small minority of it on funding business. And you should probably spend the majority of it on trying to change our laws and trying to change our culture and funding nonprofits that are helping people. And actually, this is not how we allocate our money as a society and as a planet, right? We have a huge majority of the money that's going towards the capitalist system. And so it's probably a mistake. It's probably unjust and suboptimal. Here's another question you could ask. Your career. Sometimes we talk about this number that each of us has 80,000 hours of working hours in our professional life. From the moment you start your career to the moment you retire, you're going to work for 80,000 hours. And each of us has this choice. How do we spend that time? Because it's a really valuable resource. It's what we're going to put our energy and our talent and our brain into doing. And so you could say, well, you should spend less than 32% of it on business. But I think that the calculation is a little different. Because you could work on politics, on advocacy, on nonprofits, on media. The difference with business is that if you succeed in business, and especially in entrepreneurship, you make an outsized reward in money. And money is a fungible resource. That means that you could take your money and then go fund the nonprofits and the political projects. It doesn't mean that it's the best thing to do, but it means that when you're evaluating how to spend your time, there's a case to make that business is one good option. And there's another case to make, which is that we saw that actually the financial resources are unevenly distributed, and actually there's too much money in business. That's where the resources are. That's where the funding is. And so maybe the path to making it a difference through business is a little bit easier. There's also this myth that business is a dirty sport. That business, if you're constantly searching for profit, then you're going to make moral trade-offs. You're going to make moral decisions that are contrary to humanity, to positive impact. There's this idea of dirty sport, but actually politics is a very dirty sport as well, with moral trade-offs and hierarchy and people who are doing things for the wrong reasons. Media is a dirty sport. Even the nonprofit world is a dirty sport. And actually, if you look into it, there's no one domain of life that is pure, where you can work in your career and only be driven by your values because everyone else is. That's how it works. Unfortunately, it's not true. What is true is that each one of us can have personal integrity. We can have our own values, our own code, and we can try to succeed in business, in media, in government, and nonprofit with our values intact. I want to make one more point, which is that there's something interesting happening in the financial markets, which is that there's this massive wave of investment that's coming into positive impact capitalism. This idea that, yeah, business can make a difference, even though I think it's a small difference, even though I think that most of the work to be done is in government and in nonprofits and in media and culture. In the past 12 months, there have been over 200 billion euros invested into positive impact companies and funds. The funds are going to deploy their funds in the coming years. And in the next 12 months, there's going to be even more than 200 billion euros that's put into this sector. It's massive. It's a massive amount of money. It's still a tiny percentage of all of the wealth in the world. But there's really interest in using business to make a change. And that's the choice that I've made, even though I recognize the limits, even though I recognize that if I really want to make a difference, I need to be an active citizen. I need to be active in my community. I need to try to influence the culture around me. But with my professional time, I can use these resources that are coming and that are already here to try to make a difference where there's opportunity. I have this project called Imagination Machine, which is a startup studio where we make new companies, new startups, to try to have an impact on the world. We helped create a company called 𝗵𝗽𝗻𝗽, which makes solar panels for residential use. We've just passed the 1 megawatt of installed power in France. We're accelerating the deployment of renewable energy because we've created a better user experience. We made a company called 𝗬𝗍𝗻𝗽𝗁, which makes toys that are made out of a recycled and compostable plastic, and that also have this message for kids about being open to new cultures, to new kinds of people. And this is replacing a lot of the money that's spent on plastic toys that become pollution. We've helped create a company called 𝗬𝗍𝗻𝗄, which makes tampons and pads for women, that funds with every purchase healthcare for women in need in the developing world. We've helped make a company called Good Steps that's helping every business in the world think about how they can manage their positive impact and maybe become a regenerative business that's helping save the world on every little small scale in every sector. And so that's the choice that I've made, is to try to create these companies. There's something nice about recognizing our limits and saying, no, this work that we do is a very small part of the pie. This work that we do is not going to save the world without lots of other work happening in other domains. But we can make a difference. We can have an impact, and it can be important. And so maybe I'll end there and invite you all to join me in using your work and your 80,000 hours of your career, in using your money that you're going to invest or put into use to help save the world in whatever domain you choose, in capitalism, in government, in media, in academics. These are all important fields. We all have our role to play. Thank you very much.